And good evening. This is Dr. D, and this is my first complete broadcast of 2026. And our new set is Breaking Live. So what is Breaking Live about? Breaking Live is that we can take a possibility and turn it into a potential. We can take the aspects of our life that may have a negative connotation and turn them into a positive event for us. So today, to start this out, I want to talk about the effects of smog and the smog that might be in our life. You know, the effects of smog are very noticeable. I used to live in Los Angeles, and you would get on the freeway and you would see this gray haze everywhere. And if you would go to the mountains and you would look down, you would see this gray haze, very thick smog that would be hovering over the city. And it's easily noticeable because it's ugly and it's dirty. And the results of smog are far more reaching than what people think. It has a very significant impact on our human health. But long exposure to smog, living in a community like that, it develops allergies, and you develop asthma, and you begin to maybe have respiratory failure, and there's a decreased immunity to disease in the body and to the circulatory system, and there becomes even the development of neuroplasty diseases. But smog can either affect us directly or indirectly, and indirectly it affects us by eating the plants and the meat from animals that are exposed to such conditions. And this is because the chemical factors that are used in building materials and that the carcinogens that are in the air. So my question to us from a spiritual perspective, since we're all spiritual beings having a human experience, is, are you in a spiritual fog or a spiritual smog? A spiritual fog. What is a fog? A fog is the water droplets that are close to the earth, and in a short amount of time, that fog clears and you begin to see the sun, or through the clouds, or through the rainbow, through the fog. But with the smog, that doesn't happen. What happens is in the smog, it begins to be dark, and the daytime has ended and the nighttime is there, but the smog is still there. But see, you don't recognize the smog because we set up pretty lights in the smog and pretty things to do in the smog after dark, that our attention is no longer on the smog, but it's attention on the twinkling lights, or on the things that bring temporary happiness at that time. The nightlife becomes our focus. So in our lives, what are the pollutants? What are the things that pollute our lives? And what are the things that are just fog? Now, let me explain. There comes a time in everybody's spiritual life, that you don't feel the presence and the essence of God in your life. It's a feeling thing. You pray and it feels like your prayers are hitting you on the head. It feels like they don't get answered. It feels like every time you turn around, something bad is happening to you. You can't see God. You can't feel God. You feel empty. But I want you to know that if you continue to do the work, that will pass. You know, the Job in the Bible, that he had so many things happen to him. He lost his family, he lost the cattle, he lost his riches. And he said, "Yet though he slay me, will I trust him." There is an element inside of us that if we simply can trust the divine and trust the principles of the divine, that we will not only go through the situation, but we will grow through the situation. Now, that is completely different than being in the smog. James, which was actually the first book of the New Testament written, James was the half-brother of Jesus. And James, in the first chapter of James, around the 27th verse, talks about spiritual pollution from the world. And in this, he talks about the contamination of one's inner self, the contamination of the soul, the contamination of the mind, the contamination of the spirit by worldly influences, by negative ideologies, by negative external forces. And these negative external forces, they lead to a spiritual disconnect from God or from the divine principles. And it seems that anything that corrupts or defiles, that introduces impure elements to a hindering spirit, keep us from our spiritual growth and from replacing it with the value that God has for us. We begin to replace it with greed, hatred, pride, idolatry of some reason. Now, I can speak for myself in my 76 years. I know that God, Creator, has a plan for each of us. Yes, you sitting there, the breaking news is, breaking live is that God has a plan for you. But my friends, so many times what we do is we create a plan and we try to pull God into that plan. And we plan and we scheme and we put things together and it just doesn't fit. So we reach for every kind of influence there is, for whatever thought is out there to try to put it together, and it just isn't working. I have learned and am learning in my life to stop and in the mornings to say, God, what is your plan for me? What is your thought for me? Not that I'm going to have a plan for the day and drag the God energy, the God consciousness into it. You see, there is a difference. When you understand, well, a phrase from A Course in Miracles puts it this way: if you knew, that's a knowingness through your heart, through your mind, through your being. If you knew who walked beside you on the path that you have chosen, intuitively that you have chosen, you would never doubt or fear again. Wow, that's quite a statement. That's quite a statement. The Course in Miracles also says this: if I hold a grievance against someone, then God will not hear me. Now we're talking about smog and fog. Some of the smog in our lives are because we hold a grievance, a grudge against somebody. Some of the smog in our lives is the verbiage that we use. You know, I've discovered that people want you to tell the truth until you do. And then when you tell the truth, they don't want to hear it, or they get upset at you for telling it, or they say, well, that's good for you, but that's not good for me. But the truth is, you cannot curse and bless out of the same mouth. You cannot curse and bless out of the same mouth. If you are cursing, then you aren't blessing. In the Psalms, David, the psalmist, cried all the time, "Create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O God." These are the smogs of our spiritual life that come in. So what happens is we begin to see the smog come in and we don't do anything about the pollutant. You say, well, how can I stop with the verbiage? Stop. Stop. Simply stop. Once you begin to realize that you're speaking negative words, stop. Start over. Stop, and in that moment, take a breath and realize I am on a negative path. I am on a smog, pollution of my spiritual life. When we look at our spiritual life, it should be one of love, of joy, kindness. Kindness should be the way that we should go. We aren't here to judge. We're here to love, to be loved. We're here to create joy in this world. It isn't joy when we're rounding up people and putting them in detention cages. It isn't joy when we shoot people in the street. It isn't joy when we have governments that are alienating people. It isn't joy, believe me, when you have a government administration that says as a trans woman, you don't exist. It doesn't bring joy. It doesn't bring peace. It doesn't bring happiness. So what do you do from the outside forces when these things happen? These negative external influences. How does one deal with that? I'm so glad you asked. It is during those times especially that you have to take a deep breath and realize that right now I'm in a fog. I'm in a fog. But as I practice mindfulness, as I practice meditation, as I practice affirmations, as I practice these various beliefs that come to me, then I begin to get out of the fog and I begin to see clearly. I begin to see the rainbow. I begin to see that I am enough. I begin to see that I have purpose. I begin to see that I am joy. I begin to see that I have faith and I don't have to walk in fear. I begin to see that there is a plan for me and I tune into that plan and I put legs to that plan, and my partner is the God energy creator in that plan. So my question to you as we begin this new year isn't about making a resolution, because the resolution should have been to resolve 2025 and not carry over into 2026. What is some of the pollution that we're carrying over? People in our lives. You say, oh yeah, but I've known this person a long time. Perhaps it's time to let them go. Actually, the truth is your life depends on letting them go. You can stay and enable and call it whatever you want to call it and not be free. You can do that for another year. Or you can let people go bless them and let them go so that you may live the life that you're destined to live. You may be in a career, in a job that's holding you back that you don't like. When is the time to let it go? Do a prayer and meditation. Dear God, what is the next step in my life? Let me hear your inner voice. Let me have the strength. Let me have the courage. What is courage? What is courage? Courage is to tell ourselves the radical truth. To have radical honesty about where we're at, not where we're at, where we want to be, where we're not, how to get there, what is the plan we can do to get there. So I want to challenge you as we begin this January, not to begin it like last year, not to begin it with negative ideologies, not to begin it by really concentrating on the negative external forces. You say, well, what does that mean? Turn off the TV. Turn off the TV. Yes, you can catch up on the news. But remember, the news is a news program for ratings. Turn that off. Turn off these worldly influences. Begin to gear your mind. Begin to train your spirit. Begin to train your words. Begin to train yourself to see the best in people. How often in the Pilates classes and in the yoga classes, especially the yoga, we'll say namaste. Namaste is not just a phrase. Namaste is the God in me salutes the God in you. Sometimes it's hard to see the God in other people. Can I say this? If you can't say anything good about somebody, keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Everybody is going through something. Every one of us is going through something. Hopefully, some of us are growing through these things, and yet others are going through these things. So this is Dr. D, until next Thursday, saying to you, spread a little love around. Show the world what you have found. Life is full of happiness when we found the joy inside of us. I'll see you next Thursday.